Today we will be doing the dreaded OptiSpark. So basically there's 3 steps to this process. It's going to be fairly easy. First, you have to take off your air box and your throttle body. This is your throttle body. Next, you have to take off your water pump, which is right there. Third, you have to take off your crank pulley, which is down in the depths. And then if you follow this wire right here, you can actually see the OptiSpark right there. It's buried behind all of this other stuff. So it shouldn't take too long, but I'm going to show you a step-by-step way to do it. Your first step is going to be draining the coolant. The reason why is you got to take the water pump off, so might as well do it now. First we're going to remove the housing that goes in front of the throttle body. So I'm going to unscrew this clamp right here and this clamp right here and take it out all as one unit. You also need to unplug this sensor here. There's a vacuum line here, and if you go all the way around to this side, your mass airflow sensor needs to be unplugged too. Next is the removal of the throttle body. Fairly simple, a bunch of sensors and hoses and then 4 bolts to hold it on. One thing you do need to worry about is right here is a coolant hose, and it runs coolant under the body of this throttle body. Some people have bypassed that. This one hasn't been done. So there is coolant in the throttle body. You do need to remember about that. So there's 2 hoses here, coolant hose here, a couple sensors right here for your idle air and your throttle position sensor. And then on the other side you have all your throttle cables and all that kind of fun stuff. So not that difficult to get out. Once you unplug all those things, you're going to go ahead and do the 4 bolts for your throttle body, and that will come right out. After you get the throttle body off, you can actually see a little bit better down in there where the OptiSpark is. So next is going to be water pump. So what I like to do is first take off all these top accessories. Here's a vacuum hose right here that needs to go, heater core, line, thermostat housing, and main radiator hoses. I'm going to replace the thermostat at least and the water pump. Since I have it out, might as well do it. Also, don't forget you have a couple electrical lines. I believe that's a water temp sensor right there, and you have your coil for your ignition right here. So step by step we're working our way down. Now before we go any farther, I want to show you a couple things. So we have the main water hoses off the water pump, and if you look, they're all right above the OptiSpark, which isn't really that great of a spot. But I want to show you this. This is the coil wire. So if you're familiar with any earlier model Chevys, there's a main wire that goes from the coil to the distributor cap. Now they put this across the back of the water pump. It is a possibility that this is arcing onto the back of the pump, causing a short, making your car run crappy. That's just one thing that you need to check before you go any further. It's a possibility that's all your problem is. I've already checked it. It's not this car's problem, but I'm going to go ahead and unplug it from the coil just to get it out of the way. It'll eventually come off when I pull the distributor off. But now we can maybe get to this and pull that one out. So next I'm going to go ahead and get this last heater hose on the bottom, and then I'm going to go ahead and pull the water pump, which will open up everything. It'll be really exciting. A quick tip for you is there's 2 bolts on this side of the water pump. There's one there and one there, and in order to get to the bottom bolt, you have to take the belt off because the tensioner raises up enough to block that bolt. But once you remove the belt, as you see how I've done, you actually can get a socket on there. It clears. Another thing to watch out for is this bottom heater hose. When you take that off, it just makes a huge mess. I know if I had a lift, what I would have done is I would have taken the NOx sensors out of the back of the block to drain it. Then I wouldn't have to worry about all this, but since I'm replacing the OptiSpark anyway, it's okay. So just keep an eye out for that. So next is this water pump is going to come off, and I'm sure more coolant will come out. And because of that, I'm ready. 4 buckets. Alright guys, I goofed up. I don't have the new water pump with me, so I wasn't able to look at it, but believe it or not, there's actually 3 bolts on each end of these. It's not like the old school pumps. So if you look down here, you can see right there the third one on the edge. Now the weird part is this one on this side, and the only way I was able to get to it was with one of those swivel extensions. Alright, here's the pump out of the car. I'm going to show you guys two things. One, I should probably replace that, it moves around. But this is how the water pump's driven, not by the belt, but by internal engine, which I think is kind of cool. But the second thing is this drip hole. This is the weep hole, so when if the water pump fails, water comes out. But as you know, on the car, that goes right on top of the distributor, and it's like, well, that's good. So on my new pump, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tap in a little drain valve, and then I'm going to run a hose away from the new OptiSpark just to save it, just in case my Chinese water pump doesn't work as well. But I'm going to show you guys a couple things. So here's where the coil wire goes into the OptiSpark. An interesting thing, I pulled it out, and then all these all these white plastic chunks came out. So I'm gonna probably assume that this OptiSpark is original to the motor. So the next steps are pretty simple. Basically, I'm gonna take each one of these wires and number them. I'm not gonna number them by cylinder. I'm gonna number them just by position. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then on this side 1, 2, 3, 4, and then pop all the wires out. Another thing that needs to happen is this harmonic balancer needs to be pulled, and then this OptiSpark is really only held together by 3 bolts, and that's it. And then it all goes back together. So not too bad of a job. I just know it's going to take a little bit longer to get everything out than it was to get it in. So here's the little cover. This is kind of like a drive for the water pump. Half of it goes on here, the other half goes on the water pump. So you can get that out of the way too. Yeah, I'm going to assume that is original. We'll see when we get it off though. So there's 3 bolts that go on this balancer. You take those off, and then you have to pull the balancer assembly out. Hopefully that won't be too hard of a job. Alright, your next step is to remove the balancer. It's hard to get in the camera, but there are 3 of these bolts that hold it on. Now, this balancer is a 2-part balancer. It's not like the old Chevy balancers you used to with one big bolt in the middle. It actually has a center part and an outside part, and all you have to do is remove the outside part with those 3 bolts. So I put the car in gear, broke off each one of those bolts. The bottom one you're gonna have to rotate back up in order to get to, but it's not too bad. And then since I'm replacing the opti anyway, you can use a puller to do this, but what I've been finding is that if I just do this, I can slowly walk it off, and it's out a lot farther than it used to be just by doing this. So that's what I'm gonna do to get this off. You can also use a block of wood from the underneath, or I've known people to use the puller, but since mine's not on there that bad, or that hard, I'm just going to do it this way. So once you get the balancer off, then you're ready to take the OptiSpark off. So there's 3 bolts. There's one here, there's one here, and then there's one down here, and that's why you needed to take the balancer off to kind of get it out of the way. You can actually take it out, but you can just leave it right here, which is what I'm going to do. Here's a view of the new one, so you kind of see what I'm doing. Bolt there, there's a bolt there, and then there's one farther down here. So remember, you have to take this line off right here. That's the one thing I haven't removed yet. Alright, here's the old OptiSpark. Now, on the motor, where this goes in, there should be 2 O-rings. It's missing one. I think that's the reason why it was leaking so bad, but I want to show you this end. This basically prevents you from putting in the distributor the wrong direction. So I've already taken a picture of this as the orientation it was when I got it off, but you see this, there's a pin on the engine that will only go into this one. It won't go into this one, and it won't go into this one. Ooh. That doesn't sound good. So here on the front of the engine, you can see this pin right here. That will only fit in the large opening. So you don't have to worry about really getting the distributor clock wrong like you would on a normal Chevy 350. They kind of eliminated that here, but they just made it so much harder to get to. Another thing that I did, there's a plug in the very, very bottom right there. I unplugged it. Just I thought it would be in the way. But it's dirty in there.